Welcome to Junk Drawer Facts, the place where curiosity lives in the everyday. In this video, you'll find a continuous stream of wholesome and fascinating facts covering everything from nature and science to food, geography, language, design, and the small details that make our world so interesting. Whether you're listening in the background, winding down after a long day, or just looking to learn something new, thank you for choosing to spend your time here. Now, let's open the junk drawer and see what interesting facts we discover today. Here's a cheerful little fact to start with. The smell of fresh rain has a name. It's called petrichor, and it happens when rain hits dry ground and releases natural oils and compounds from the soil into the air. That cozy rain smell is one of those tiny everyday things that feels almost magical. And speaking of tiny everyday magic, bubbles around because a sphere is the shape that uses the least surface area to hold the most volume. So when soap film stretches around air, it naturally pulls itself into a little floating globe. And that idea, nature finding efficient shapes, shows up all over the place. Honeycombs, for example, are built in hexagons because hexagons fit together without gaps and use space beautifully. Bees are tiny architects, and their work is so efficient that engineers and designers often study honeycomb patterns for strength and lightness. You can see similar clever design in snowflakes too. Every snowflake forms around a tiny particle in the air, and as water vapor freezes onto it, it grows into a six-sided crystal. The exact shape depends on temperature and humidity, which is why snowflakes can look so different from one another. That brings us from snow to clouds, because clouds are basically collections of tiny water droplets or ice crystals floating in the sky. Even though they look soft and weightless, a large cloud can contain an enormous amount of water. The reason it stays up there is that the droplets are so small and spread out that rising air currents can keep them suspended. And clouds have their own personality in a way. Fluffy cumulus clouds often show fair weather, while thin, wispy cirrus clouds form very high up where the air is cold. Cold air also helps explain why your breath can look visible on a chilly day. When warm, moist air from your mouth meets cold outside air, the moisture condenses into tiny droplets, almost like a miniature cloud. That little cloud disappears quickly as the droplets spread out. And speaking of things that appear and disappear, rainbows are not actually objects sitting in the sky. A rainbow is an optical effect created when sunlight enters raindrops, bends, reflects inside the drop, and spreads into colors as it comes back out. That's why your view of a rainbow depends on where you are standing. Color itself is a fascinating topic. The sky looks blue because shorter blue wavelengths of sunlight scatter more easily in Earth's atmosphere. During sunrise and sunset, sunlight travels through more atmosphere, so more of the blue light scatters away before it reaches your eyes, leaving the warmer reds, oranges, and pinks. That same sunlight is also what helps plants make their own food through photosynthesis. Plants use sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide to create sugars, and as part of that process, they release oxygen. Plants are full of surprising little details. Young sunflowers often track the sun from east to west during the day, then reset overnight to face east again. As they mature, many sunflowers settle facing east, which helps them warm up earlier in the morning. And if you've ever seen a field of sunflowers, that east-facing habit can make the whole field seem like it's greeting the day together. Flowers also use color and scent to attract pollinators, and some flowers even change color as they age. Hydrangeas are famous for changing color depending on soil chemistry. In more acidic soil, certain hydrangeas can bloom blue, while in more alkaline soil, they may bloom pink. It's like the garden is quietly telling you what's happening underground. And underground, there is a whole world of roots, fungi, and tiny organisms helping plants share nutrients and signals. Trees are especially impressive in that quiet, grounded way. A mature tree can move water from its roots all the way up to its leaves through tiny tubes in its trunk, using a combination of evaporation from the leaves and the natural pull of water molecules sticking together. That process is called transpiration, and it is one reason trees can help cool the air around them. Shade helps, of course, But trees also release water vapor, creating a gentle natural cooling effect. That cooling effect is one reason city planners love urban trees. Tree-lined streets can feel calmer and cooler, and they also soften the look of a neighborhood. The idea of designing places that feel good to humans shows up in architecture too. Many old homes have high ceilings, not just for beauty, but because warm air rises and taller rooms can feel more comfortable in warm seasons. Porches were also practical before air conditioning became common, giving people a shaded place to sit and catch a breeze. Breezes, of course, are simply air moving from areas of higher pressure to areas of lower pressure. Wind can feel invisible, but you can see what it does everywhere. Leaves rustling, flags waving, water rippling, and clouds drifting. Sailboats use wind in a wonderfully clever way. A sail does not just get pushed from behind. It can also work a bit like an airplane wing, creating lift as wind moves around it. That's why skilled sailors can travel at angles to the wind instead of only being pushed straight forward. Airplane wings use that same general principle of lift. Air moves around the wing, pressure changes, and the plane is supported in the air. It's an amazing reminder that everyday physics can make something enormous feel graceful. Birds had this figured out long before humans built airplanes. Many birds use rising columns of warm air, called thermals, to glide with very little effort. That's why you may see large birds circling slowly in the sky on warm days. Birds are full of lovely facts. Hummingbirds are the only birds that can hover in place for long stretches, and they can even fly backward. Their wings move in a figure-8 pattern, which gives them incredible control. Flamingos get their pink color from pigments in the food they eat, and a group of flamingos is delightfully called a flamboyance. Owls have specially shaped feathers that help them fly very quietly, which is one reason they seem so mysterious and graceful. And while we're talking about animals with charming features, goats have rectangular pupils. That shape gives them a wide field of view, which helps them notice movement around them while they graze. Cats have whiskers that help them sense nearby objects and air movement. A cat's whiskers are deeply connected to nerves, so they work like tiny touch sensors. Dogs, meanwhile, have an incredible sense of smell, and the unique pattern on a dog's nose is sometimes compared to a human fingerprint because each one is distinct. Sea otters often rest in groups called rafts, and they sometimes hold paws while floating so they don't drift apart. That is one of those facts that sounds almost too cute to be real, but it fits perfectly with how social and cozy they can be. Penguins also have a charming way of moving because their waddle helps conserve energy as they walk. Their bodies are built more for swimming than strolling, so the waddle is actually practical. Practical design shows up in fruit too. Bananas are technically berries in botanical terms, while strawberries are not true berries in the same botanical sense. That feels backwards, but botany has its own rules. A pineapple is not one single fruit, but a cluster of many small fruits that fuse together as it grows. Each little diamond-shaped section on the outside is connected to one of those individual flowers. And vanilla, one of the most familiar flavors in the world, comes from the seed pods of orchids. Speaking of familiar flavors, cinnamon is made from the inner bark of certain trees. When that bark dries, it curls into the sticks we recognize. Maple syrup begins as sap from maple trees, and it takes a lot of sap to make a small amount of syrup because most of the water has to be evaporated away. Popcorn pops because each kernel contains a tiny bit of moisture inside a hard outer shell. When heated, the moisture turns to steam, pressure builds, and the kernel turns inside out into a fluffy snack. Food science is packed with little surprises. Bread rises because yeast produces carbon dioxide bubbles as it feeds on sugars in the dough. Those bubbles get trapped in the stretchy gluten structure, making the dough expand. Pasta gets its shape from tradition, texture, and sauce pairing. Ridges help sauce cling, tubes hold sauce inside, and long noodles work beautifully with lighter sauces. Even the shape of a spoon matters. A rounded spoon makes soup easier to sip, while a flat spatula is better for sliding under food. That brings us to kitchen tools, which are simple inventions that make daily life easier. The whisk works by pulling air into liquids, which is why it can make cream fluffy or eggs smoother. A rolling pin spreads dough evenly by applying steady pressure. A colander separates food from water with the most straightforward design imaginable: a bowl with holes. Sometimes the best inventions are not complicated. They are just perfectly suited to the job. Interlocking tiny teeth as the slider moves along them. It seems simple now, but it changed clothing, bags, and travel gear in a big way. Velcro was inspired by burrs that stick to fabric and fur. After noticing how tiny hooks on burrs cling to loops, an inventor created a fastening system based on the same idea. Nature is basically a giant library of design ideas. That library includes lotus leaves, which have tiny surface structures that help water roll off easily, carrying dirt away as it goes. This is called the lotus effect, and it has inspired self-cleaning materials. Gecko feet have inspired studies into dry adhesives because geckos can cling to surfaces using tiny structures on their toes. Shark skin has inspired swimsuit and surface designs because of its texture. Even butterfly wings have inspired color technology because some butterflies get their color not from pigment but from microscopic structures that reflect light in special ways. Light is a wonderful thread to follow because it connects so many facts. The moon does not make its own light. It reflects sunlight. That's why it changes appearance throughout the month as the moon, earth, and sun shift positions. The moon always shows us the same side because it rotates once in about the same amount of time it takes to orbit Earth. That's called synchronous rotation. It's a quiet cosmic dance that has been happening for a very long time. Earth itself is always moving, even when everything feels still. It rotates once roughly every 24 hours, giving us day and night, and it travels around the sun once a year. The tilt of Earth's axis gives us seasons. When your part of the planet is tilted toward the sun, sunlight is more direct and days are longer. When it is tilted away, sunlight is less direct and days are shorter. That tilt is also why summer and winter happen at opposite times in the northern and southern hemispheres. The planet is full of gentle geographic surprises. The Pacific Ocean is the largest ocean on Earth, and it is so wide that it covers more area than all the land on the planet combined. The Sahara is the largest hot desert, but not all deserts are hot. A desert is defined mainly by how little precipitation it receives. Some deserts are cold, and some are covered in ice. The Amazon River carries more water than any other river, and the Amazon rainforest helps influence weather patterns far beyond its own region. Rivers are one of nature's great connectors. They shape valleys, carry nutrients, support transportation, and often become the heart of cities. Many cities grew near rivers because rivers offered water, food access, and easy routes for trade and travel. Bridges then became essential, and a bridge is basically a promise that two places can be connected. Some bridges use arches, some use suspension cables, and some use beams, but they all solve the same basic problem in different ways. Roads do something similar. They connect homes, neighborhoods, towns, and stories. The interstate highway system in the United States uses odd numbers for many north-south routes and even numbers for many east-west routes. In cities, street grids can make navigation easier because the pattern gives people a sense of direction. But older cities often have winding streets because they grew gradually from footpaths, wagon routes, or natural features. That is why some streets seem to have a personality all their own. Maps help us make sense of those places, but every flat map has to distort the round Earth in some way. It is impossible to flatten a globe perfectly without stretching or compressing something. That's why different map projections are useful for different purposes. Some preserve shape better, some preserve area better, and some are designed for navigation. A globe is the most accurate small model of Earth, but a folded map is a lot easier to put in a glove compartment. Compasses are another classic navigation tool. A compass needle points roughly toward magnetic north because it responds to Earth's magnetic field. Magnetic north is not exactly the same as geographic North Pole, and it slowly shifts over time. Before digital navigation, people relied on compasses, landmarks, stars, and careful observation. The North Star, Polaris, has been useful in the Northern Hemisphere because it appears close to the direction of north in the night sky. Stars are suns, just very far away. The sun looks bigger and brighter than other stars because it is much closer to us. Light from the sun takes a little over 8 minutes to reach Earth, which means sunlight is already a few minutes old by the time it warms your face. Sunlight is also a blend of many colors, and when passed through a prism, it spreads out into a spectrum. That's the same basic color-splitting idea behind rainbows. Telescopes let us gather more light than our eyes can on their own, making distant objects easier to see. The larger the telescope's light collecting area, the more detail it can reveal. Microscopes do the opposite kind of magic. Instead of bringing far-away things closer, they make tiny things visible. With microscopes, people discovered whole worlds in drops of water, on leaves, and in everyday materials. It is humbling to realize that there are entire layers of reality we need tools to notice. Sound has hidden layers too. Sound travels as vibrations through air, water, or solid materials. That's why you can feel bass through the floor or hear a train from far away through a track before it sounds loud in the air. In a large, empty room, sound waves bounce off walls and create echoes. Soft materials like curtains, rugs, and cushions absorb some of those waves, which is why furnished rooms usually sound warmer and quieter than empty ones. Music is organized sound, and rhythm may be one of the most universal parts of human experience. A steady beat can make people want to tap their foot without even thinking about it. Instruments make sound in different ways. Guitars use vibrating strings, flutes use vibrating air, drums use vibrating membranes, and pianos use hammers striking strings inside the instrument. A piano is technically both a string instrument and a percussion instrument, which is a fun little category twist. Language has its own music. Every language has rhythm, melody, and patterns. Some words are onomatopoeic, meaning they imitate sounds like buzz, click, or splash. The word alphabet comes from the first two letters of the Greek alphabet, alpha and beta. The ampersand symbol, the little and sign, used to be treated almost like an extra character in the alphabet by some English speakers. Language is always changing, which is why new words appear and old words shift in meaning. The word goodbye comes from an older phrase meaning God be with ye, which gradually shortened over time. Breakfast literally means breaking a fast because it is the meal that breaks the overnight pause from eating. Window comes from an old term meaning wind eye, which is beautifully poetic for an opening that lets in air and light. Everyday words carry little histories around with them, even when we don't notice. Numbers have their own hidden charm. A dozen means 12, and a baker's dozen means 13. The extra item was traditionally a way to make sure a customer received full value. The number 0 was a major mathematical breakthrough because it allowed place value number systems to work more powerfully. Without 0, modern math, computing, and engineering would be much harder to express. It is amazing that nothing can be such an important something. Calendars are another way humans organize the world. A leap year adds an extra day to help keep the calendar aligned with Earth's orbit around the Sun. Without leap years, the calendar would slowly drift away from the seasons. The names of the months have layers of history too. Some come from Roman gods, some from rulers, and some from old numbering systems. September, October, November, and December contain roots connected to 7, 8, 9, and 10, even though they are now the 9th through 12th months. Time zones are a relatively modern solution to a practical problem. Before standardized time, many towns kept local time based on the sun. As railways and communication networks expanded, standardized time became much more useful. Today, time zones help the world coordinate schedules, travel, broadcasts, and business. And yet, even with all our clocks, our bodies still respond strongly to light. Morning light can help signal wakefulness, while dimmer evening light helps tell the body that the day is winding down. Sleepy routines are often built from tiny comfort signals: a warm drink, a favorite blanket, a familiar sound, or a soft lamp. Textiles add a lot to comfort. Cotton comes from the fluffy fibers around cotton seeds. Linen comes from the flax plant and is known for feeling cool and breathable. Wool fibers have tiny scales and natural crimp, which help trap air and provide warmth. Fabric dyeing is another ancient and creative craft. Indigo dye creates deep blue shades, and it has been used in many cultures for a very long time. Natural dyes can come from plants, minerals, and other sources, while modern dyes allow for a huge range of consistent colors. Color can change the mood of a room dramatically. Soft greens can feel restful, warm whites can feel welcoming, and deep blues can feel calm and classic. That feeling of color is partly personal and partly practical. A light color on a wall can make a room feel more open because it reflects more light, while a darker color can make a space feel cozy and tucked in. Paint finishes matter too. A matte finish softens a wall by reflecting less light, while a glossier finish bounces more light and is easier to wipe clean. Even the same color can look different throughout the day because morning light, afternoon light, and lamplight all bring out different tones. Interior design often uses the rule of thirds, balance, and texture to make a space feel pleasing. A room can feel more interesting when it mixes smooth surfaces, woven textures, soft fabrics, wood tones, and a few reflective accents. Plants can make a room feel more alive, and mirrors can bounce light around to make a space feel brighter. Even small changes, like swapping a lampshade, adding a rug, or moving a chair closer to a window, can change how a room feels. Furniture has its own quiet logic. A chair is not just a place to sit. It is a little piece of engineering shaped around the human body. Tables work best when their height matches the task, which is why dining tables, coffee tables, and desks are all built differently. Shelves turn walls into storage, and drawers keep small things from becoming little mysteries around the house. A well-placed hook can be surprisingly satisfying because it turns empty wall space into an organized landing spot. Light bulbs have changed daily life in enormous ways. Incandescent bulbs create light by heating a filament, while LED bulbs use semiconductors and are much more energy efficient. LEDs can also produce many different colors, which is why they show up in everything from home lighting to screens. A screen creates images using tiny points of light called pixels. The more pixels packed into a space, the sharper the image can appear. Screens also use refresh rates, which describe how many times the image updates each second. A higher refresh rate can make motion look smoother, especially when something is moving quickly across the screen. Brightness, contrast, and color balance all shape how an image feels. That is why the same photo can look a little different on a phone, a television, and a laptop. Each screen is a tiny stage for light. Photography is basically the art of capturing light. Early cameras needed long exposure times, but modern cameras can capture a moment instantly. A camera lens bends light to focus an image, and the aperture controls how much light enters. A wider aperture can create a softly blurred background, while a smaller aperture keeps more of the scene in focus. That's why portraits often have creamy backgrounds and landscapes often look sharp from front to back. Composition is another part of photography that connects back to design. Placing the subject slightly off-center can make an image feel more natural. Leading lines, like roads, fences, paths, or rows of lights, can guide the eye through a picture. Reflections in windows or puddles can make an ordinary scene feel layered. Even shadows can add shape and depth, turning a simple object into something more interesting. Printing takes images and text from the digital or designed world and places them onto paper or other surfaces. Traditional printing uses combinations of colors layered together, often cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. Those four inks can create a wide range of printed colors. On screens, color is usually made with red, green, and blue light. Add those lights together at full brightness, and you get white. Paper itself has a surprisingly rich story. It is made from fibers that are pressed into thin sheets, and those fibers can come from wood, cotton, or other plant materials. The texture of paper changes how writing and printing feel. Smooth paper can make ink look crisp, while textured paper can feel warm and handmade. A notebook can feel inviting partly because of its cover, partly because of its paper, and partly because blank pages make room for ideas. Typography is the design of letters, and it quietly affects how we read. Serif fonts have small finishing strokes on the ends of letters, while sans serif fonts have cleaner, simpler edges. Large spacing can make text feel airy, while tight spacing can feel compact. Even punctuation has personality. A comma creates a small pause, a period creates a firmer stop, and an exclamation point adds a little sparkle when it is used gently. White light, blue skies, green leaves, golden pancakes, warm coffee, quiet roads, and soft music all connect back to the same idea. The world is packed with small details that are easy to miss until someone points them out. A cup of coffee has aroma because warm liquid releases tiny scent molecules into the air. A pancake browns because heat creates flavor and color changes on the surface. Toast gets crisp because moisture leaves the bread and the surface changes as it warms. Even the simple act of stirring a drink shows physics in motion. When you stir, the liquid keeps moving for a bit because of momentum. Tiny whirlpools form, sugar dissolves faster, and the temperature becomes more even. Ice floats because solid water is less dense than liquid water, which is unusual and very important for lakes and rivers in cold places. The floating ice creates a layer on top, while liquid water can remain underneath. Water is one of the most familiar substances on Earth, but it behaves in remarkable ways. It can dissolve many materials, which is why it is sometimes called a universal solvent. Water also has surface tension, which allows small insects to stand on its surface and makes droplets bead up on a clean car after rain. That same surface tension helps water climb slightly up thin tubes and fibers, a process called capillary action. Capillary action helps explain how paper towels absorb spills. Tiny spaces between fibers pull water inward. Sponges work similarly, holding water in many small openings. The idea of many small openings also shows up in bread, cake, and foam. Foam is just a collection of bubbles, and whether it appears in soap, whipped cream, or a latte, it depends on air being trapped inside a liquid or soft structure. A latte brings us back to milk, and milk foam happens because proteins help stabilize tiny air bubbles. Baristas use steam to add both heat and air, creating a creamy texture. Tea has its own science too. Different teas come from the same plant, Camellia sinensis, but they are processed differently. Green tea, black tea, white tea, and oolong all have distinct flavors because of how the leaves are handled after picking. Herbs and spices add another layer of plant magic. Basil is part of the mint family. Cilantro leaves and coriander seeds come from the same plant. Saffron comes from the dried stigmas of crocus flowers, which is why it is so labor-intensive to gather. Black pepper comes from dried peppercorn berries, and it was once so valuable that it traveled widely through trade routes. Trade helped spread foods around the world. Tomatoes, potatoes, corn, chocolate, and vanilla all became global ingredients after originating in the Americas. Citrus fruits traveled across regions over centuries, and today lemons, limes, oranges, and grapefruits show up in cuisines all over the world. Food is a delicious map of human connection, climate, farming, travel, and creativity. And creativity is really the thread running through all of this. People noticed stars and made calendars. They noticed plants and made gardens. They noticed sound and made music. They noticed clay and made pottery. Pottery is one of the oldest practical arts because clay can be shaped when wet and hardened with heat. Glass is made by heating sand and other materials until they melt together, and stained glass adds color by using minerals and metal compounds. Glass also lets us build windows, jars, lenses, mirrors, and screens. A mirror reflects light in a way that preserves an image, which is why it shows your reflection. A clear window lets visible light pass through, which is why a sunny room can feel so cheerful. And when sunlight passes through a prism or raindrop, we are back at color again, which is a lovely reminder that many facts are connected in circles. So the next time you see a cloud, a flower, a street sign, a loaf of bread, a cup of coffee, a houseplant, a dog nose, a zipper, a rainbow, or a glowing screen, there is probably a tiny fact hiding inside it. The world is not only interesting in museums, textbooks, or faraway places. It is interesting in grocery stores, kitchens, sidewalks, cars, gardens, and quiet rooms. Every ordinary object has a story, and every story leads to another one. That may be the most comforting fact of all. Curiosity does not require a special occasion. It is always available, right here in the everyday world, waiting for someone to notice. Picking up from that everyday curiosity, a sidewalk is a surprisingly good place to keep noticing things. Concrete, for example, is not the same as cement. Cement is one ingredient in concrete, while concrete is a mixture that usually includes cement, water, sand, and gravel. When water reacts with cement, it forms a hard material that holds everything together. That is why concrete does not simply dry like paint. It cures through a chemical process. And the little lines cut into sidewalks are not just decoration. They help control where cracks are more likely to form as the concrete expands, contracts, and settles over time. In a way, those lines are planned little pathways for movement. Roads use similar ideas because pavement also expands and contracts with temperature. That is one reason bridges often have expansion joints, which let the bridge move slightly without losing its shape or function. Bridges bring us back to connection, and connection is also the heart of transportation. A bicycle is one of the most efficient human-powered machines ever made. The round wheels reduce friction, the chain transfers energy from the pedals, and the gears help the rider adjust effort for hills or flat roads. The reason bicycles balance so smoothly once they are moving has to do with steering, momentum, and tiny adjustments the rider makes without thinking much about it. A car tire is another everyday object with clever design inside it. The tread pattern helps channel water away from the road surface, while the air inside the tire helps cushion the ride. Rubber is flexible, which helps tires grip the road, and the circular shape spreads weight evenly as the wheel turns. Even the valve stem has a tidy purpose. It lets air in and helps keep it from escaping. So much of transportation depends on small parts doing their jobs quietly. The same is true inside an elevator. Elevators use counterweights to balance much of the weight of the elevator car, making the system more efficient. The buttons feel simple from the outside, but behind the scenes, the elevator is solving a little routing puzzle as it moves between floors. Escalators are clever too. Each step stays level because it travels on tracks that guide it into the right position as the staircase moves. Moving walkways at airports work on a similar idea, and airports themselves are designed around flow. Signs, lighting, seating, and open pathways all help people move through large spaces with less confusion. Good wayfinding is a kind of invisible hospitality. When a sign is clear, a doorway is easy to find, or a path feels natural, someone designed that experience with human behavior in mind. Libraries are also designed around calm discovery. The word library comes from a root connected to books, but libraries today are much more than shelves. They are places for reading, learning, gathering, researching, and sometimes just enjoying a quiet seat. The system of arranging books by subject helps people wander with purpose. You may look for one book and end up near 5 others that catch your attention, which is one of the quiet joys of browsing. Books themselves are wonderfully practical objects. A spine holds pages together, a cover protects them, and margins give the eye a little breathing room. Page numbers are a small invention with a big effect because they make it easy for people to refer to the same place in a text. Bookmarks are even simpler. A tiny tool that remembers where you paused. There is something sweet about an object whose entire job is to say, "You can come back here." The act of reading uses pattern recognition at an impressive speed. Your eyes move across lines, your brain recognizes shapes as letters, letters become words, and words become meaning. Skilled readers do not process each letter one at a time in a slow, mechanical way. The brain becomes very good at recognizing familiar word shapes and context. That is part of why reading can feel effortless, even though it is a complicated mental performance. Writing has its own tool history. Pencils write because graphite leaves tiny particles on paper. The lead in a pencil is not actually lead, it is graphite mixed with clay. The ratio changes how hard or dark the pencil feels. Erasers work because their material grabs graphite particles from the paper. A good eraser is basically a gentle little cleaner for mistakes, which is a comforting idea all by itself. Pens work differently depending on the type. A ballpoint pen uses a tiny rolling ball to transfer ink onto paper. A fountain pen uses capillary action to draw ink through the nib. A marker uses a porous tip that carries ink from the inside to the writing surface. Highlighters use bright, translucent ink so the original words remain visible underneath. Each writing tool changes the feeling of the words a little. Calligraphy turns writing into visual art by paying attention to line thickness, spacing, rhythm, and movement. The angle of the pen or brush can completely change the character of a letter. Typography does something similar in printed or digital form. A rounded font may feel friendly, a narrow font may feel efficient, and a classic serif font may feel traditional. Letters are not just symbols. They have posture, mood, and style. Style shows up in clothing too. Buttons are small fasteners, but they can also be decorative. The buttonhole has to be just large enough for the button to slip through and just snug enough to hold. Snaps use interlocking pieces that press together. Drawstrings gather fabric with a simple pull. Elastic works because it stretches and returns to shape, which makes it useful in waistbands, cuffs, and soft-fitted items. Shoelaces are another tiny system. When you tie a bow, you create loops and tension that hold the shoe snugly while still allowing it to be untied quickly. The little plastic or metal tips at the ends of laces are called aglets, and they keep the lace from fraying while making it easier to thread. It is a wonderfully specific word for a wonderfully specific job. Hats have practical design too. A brim shades the eyes, a knit cap traps warmth, and a wide crown can create airflow around the head. Sunglasses reduce glare by limiting bright light, and polarized lenses can reduce reflected glare from flat surfaces like water, glass, or pavement. That is why polarized sunglasses can make a bright day feel gentler to the eyes. Gentle light matters indoors as well. A lampshade diffuses light so it spreads more softly through a room. Warm-colored bulbs can make an evening space feel calmer, while cooler light can feel more alert and focused. Dimmer switches are useful because the same room might need bright light for cleaning, medium light for dinner, and soft light for winding down. Lighting is one of the easiest ways to change the mood of a space without moving a single piece of furniture. Candles add a different kind of atmosphere because their light flickers. That flicker happens because the flame responds to tiny air movements and the steady feeding of melted wax through the wick. The wick draws wax upward, the wax vapor helps feed the flame, and the process creates that soft glow people often associate with coziness. Even without using a candle, battery lights can imitate that gentle flicker for the same comforting effect. Comfort also lives in scent. Lavender is often associated with calm because of its soft herbal fragrance. Peppermint smells bright and cool because of menthol. Citrus scents can feel fresh because lemons, oranges, and grapefruits contain fragrant oils in their peels. If you gently bend a piece of citrus peel, tiny droplets of oil can spray into the air, which is why zest can add such a lively aroma to food. Aroma is a big part of flavor. Taste buds detect basics like sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami, but much of what we experience as flavor comes from smell. That is why food can seem less flavorful when your nose is stuffy. Texture matters too. A crispy food, a creamy soup, a chewy noodle, and a fluffy biscuit each create a different experience even before the flavor fully arrives. Baking is especially full of transformations. Baking powder creates gas bubbles when it reacts with moisture and heat, helping cakes and biscuits rise. Butter creates tenderness and flavor, and when cold butter melts in dough, it can leave little pockets that help create flakiness. Sugar does more than sweeten. It can help with browning, moisture, and texture. Salt can make sweet flavors taste brighter when used in the right amount. The oven itself is a controlled heat box, and different parts of the oven can be slightly warmer or cooler. That is why rotating a baking sheet can help cookies brown more evenly. A metal pan transfers heat differently than glass or ceramic. Dark pans can brown food faster because they absorb more heat, while lighter pans may create a gentler bake. The kitchen is basically a friendly little laboratory. Refrigerators are another everyday marvel. They do not create cold so much as move heat out of the inside compartment. A refrigerant circulates through the system, absorbing heat from inside and releasing it outside. That is why the back or bottom of a refrigerator can feel warm. The appliance is quietly moving warmth away from your groceries all day long. Freezers slow changes in food by keeping temperatures low enough for water to become ice. Ice cube trays create a simple shape, but the cloudy center of an ice cube often forms because air and minerals get pushed inward as water freezes from the outside in. Clear ice usually requires slower, more directional freezing so trapped air has somewhere to go. Even a glass of ice water has a little science lesson floating in it. Dishwashers are clever too. They use spray arms that spin and shoot water at different angles. Detergent helps loosen food particles, hot water improves cleaning, and the layout of the racks helps water reach the surfaces. The little compartments and prongs are not random. They guide plates, bowls, and utensils into positions where water can do its work. Washing machines use water, detergent, and motion to lift dirt from fabric. Front-loading machines tumble clothes through water, while top-loading machines often use an agitator or impeller. The spin cycle removes water by rotating quickly, using centrifugal force to push water out through small openings in the drum. That is why clothes come out damp instead of dripping. Dryers remove moisture by moving warm air through tumbling clothes. Lint forms when tiny fibers come loose from fabric, and the lint trap catches many of them. Cleaning the lint trap helps air move properly and makes the dryer work more efficiently. It is a tiny household habit with a practical payoff. Household routines are full of small systems like that. A broom gathers dust using bristles. A mop spreads and absorbs water across a floor. A vacuum cleaner uses suction created by airflow to pull dust and debris into a container or bag. A doormat helps catch particles before they travel farther inside. A tidy entryway is really a tiny boundary between outside and inside. Boundaries also shape gardens. A raised garden bed warms faster in spring, drains well, and makes it easier to control the soil. Mulch helps hold moisture, moderate soil temperature, and reduce weeds. Compost turns food scraps and yard material into nutrient-rich organic matter through the work of microbes, air, moisture, and time. It is one of the nicest examples of everyday renewal. Gardens are also guided by pollination, sunlight, soil, and patience. Some plants like full sun, while others prefer shade. Some herbs grow happily in containers, and some vegetables need deeper roots. Trellises help climbing plants grow upward, saving space and improving airflow. A garden stake may look simple, but to a plant, it can be a helpful bit of support. Support is a theme in houseplants too. A moss pole can help a climbing plant grow upward. Drainage holes help prevent too much water from sitting around the roots. Leaves turn toward light because plants can respond to light direction over time. Rotating a houseplant can help it grow more evenly, although some plants are perfectly happy leaning toward a favorite window. Windows connect indoor life with the outside world. Double-pane windows help insulate by trapping a layer of air or gas between two sheets of glass. Curtains can soften light, add privacy, and help a room feel finished. Blinds use adjustable slats so you can control the angle of light. A sunny window can become a stage for dust motes, plant leaves, and the slow movement of afternoon light. That slow movement is a reminder that shadows are always changing. A shadow is made when an object blocks light, and the shape of the shadow depends on the angle and distance of the light source. Morning and evening shadows are longer because the sun is lower in the sky. Around midday, shadows are shorter because sunlight comes from a higher angle. Even a plain wall can become interesting when the light moves across it. And from shadows, it is easy to think about sundials, one of the oldest ways to tell time. A sundial uses the position of a shadow to show the time of day. Mechanical clocks later used gears, weights, springs, and pendulums to measure time more consistently. Quartz clocks use the steady vibration of a quartz crystal. Atomic clocks use the consistent behavior of atoms and are astonishingly precise. Timekeeping leads naturally to schedules, and schedules shape daily life in gentle ways. Morning routines help people start the day, evening routines help them close it, and calendars help turn intentions into plans. A checklist works because it moves a task out of memory and onto a visible surface. Crossing something off a list gives a small sense of progress, which is one reason lists can feel so satisfying. Satisfying routines also show up in crafts. Knitting uses loops of yarn connected in rows, while crochet uses one hook to build stitches one at a time. Weaving crosses threads over and under each other to create fabric, and the pattern of those crossings changes the look and strength of the material. A basket is similar in spirit because flexible materials are woven into a useful shape that can carry or store things. Clay offers another kind of making. When clay is wet, it can be pinched, coiled, rolled, or shaped on a wheel. As it dries, it becomes firmer, and after firing in a kiln, it becomes much harder. Glaze adds colour and a glassy surface, which can make pottery easier to clean and more pleasant to use. A handmade mug can feel special, partly because it carries the marks of the person who shaped it. Woodworking has its own language of grain, joints, sanding, and finish. Wood grain shows the growth pattern of a tree, and different woods have different colours, textures, and strengths. Sandpaper works by using tiny abrasive particles to smooth a surface. A finish can protect wood while bringing out its natural pattern. That is why a plain board can become rich and warm-looking after sanding and oiling. Paper crafts turn flat sheets into shapes. Origami uses folding to create structure without cutting or glue. A crease gives the paper memory, helping it hold a form. Paper airplanes fly because their folds create wings, and small adjustments can change how they glide. A kite works in a similar spirit, using moving air to lift a light frame and surface into the sky. Kites connect nicely to weather. A windsock shows wind direction and gives a rough sense of wind strength by how fully it extends. A weather vane points with the wind, while an anemometer measures wind speed. A barometer measures air pressure, and changing pressure can hint at shifting weather. A rain gauge does exactly what its name suggests. It collects and measures rainfall. Umbrellas are weather tools too. The curved canopy directs rain away, ribs support the fabric, and the handle gives your hand a dry little command center. Raincoats use tightly woven or coated fabric to keep water from soaking through. Boots lift your feet away from puddles. Even a simple hood is thoughtful design, making weather easier to live with. Living with weather also means noticing seasons. Spring flowers often respond to increasing daylight and warmer soil. Summer brings longer days and stronger sunlight. Autumn leaves change color when chlorophyll fades and other pigments become more visible. Winter can make tree branches easier to see because leaves are not hiding their shapes. Each season reveals a different version of the same place. Places also change through sound. A neighborhood can sound different in the morning, afternoon, and evening. Birds may be more noticeable early in the day. Wind may make leaves shimmer. A distant train can create a low rolling sound that seems to stretch across the air. Even a quiet street has layers. Footsteps, bicycle wheels, doors closing softly, and the hum of everyday life. Sound travels differently depending on the surroundings. Snow can make a landscape feel quieter because its fluffy structure absorbs sound. A hallway can make footsteps echo because hard surfaces reflect sound waves. A carpeted room softens sound because fibers absorb some of the energy. That is why theatres, studios, and cozy restaurants often pay close attention to acoustics. Restaurants also use layout and lighting to shape experience. A booth can feel private because it has high backs and defined edges. A round table makes conversation feel easy because everyone faces inward. Menus use categories, descriptions, and spacing to help people decide. The order of a menu can guide attention, just like signs guide people through an airport or labels guide people through a grocery aisle. Grocery stores are full of everyday systems. Produce sections often use mist to keep leafy greens fresh-looking and hydrated. Apples are usually displayed in piles because their round shape stacks attractively, while delicate berries are protected in smaller containers. Barcodes help identify products quickly at checkout. The lines on a barcode represent numbers that a scanner reads using light. Packaging is its own design world. A carton protects eggs by giving each one a little cushioned space. A cereal box stands upright because its rectangular shape is easy to stack and display. A jar is useful because glass does not easily absorb smells or colors. A resealable bag works because two shaped plastic tracks press together to form a temporary seal. Temporary seals show up all around us. A lid keeps a drink from spilling. A cap protects a pen tip. A cork or stopper closes a bottle. A rubber gasket creates a snug seal by compressing between two surfaces. The refrigerator door seal, for example, helps keep cool air inside. When you notice these little edges and closures, the world starts to look like a collection of tiny solutions. And that brings us to containers, which are quietly essential. A cup holds liquid, a bowl holds food, a drawer holds objects, and a suitcase holds travel plans. The shape of a container depends on what it needs to do. A handle helps with carrying. A spout helps with pouring. A wide opening helps with scooping. A narrow neck helps with controlled flow. As this stretch of facts closes, the theme stays simple. Ordinary things become fascinating when you look closely. From a dishwasher spray arm to a garden trellis, a barcode, a pen cap, or a favorite cup. Everyday objects are full of quiet intelligence waiting to be noticed.